This next story is about Grandfather Rabbit and Hunter Boy. It involves cattails. Cattails are very special to me because I consider them miracles of nature. Whenever I see them in the spring, I am so excited because the rivers and lakes and marshes where they grow are just filled with, brown cattails, cattails that, have passed their season. And so I think, how can new cattails, come forth? There's no room. All of this old brush is still left, and yet emerge the new, fresh cattails. And it's just so special to me. I can't begin to say how much it means to me to see the cattails in the spring. So anyway, this story is about Pack Rat having visited the Pueblos. And he had visited them in the evening, and they had been cooking food, and he was really surprised because a lot of the food they cooked was similar to the Dine in terms of, using seeds and berries and nuts and making bread. But they also had meat, animal meat, and he was really surprised because the Navajos had no game for hunting, and it was not a part of their tradition or a part of their ceremonial rites. They didn't have any weapons or ways of hunting. It was something very foreign to them. But he watched as they did this, and when he went back, he told Hunter Boy about what he had seen. And Hunter Boy went on and told First Woman. First Woman was very surprised to hear this because all of the animals that had come from the lower world were considered equal, and she couldn't imagine that any of them would be hunted and killed for eating. It seemed so foreign to her, and she thought it would destroy the harmony and the peace among the Dene. So while she listened, she didn't take any action to encourage it. But Hunter Boy was very interested in what he had heard, and he asked Pet Crow about it, and Pet Crow said, well, they hunt with bows and arrows, and these bows and arrows are kept on their porches in front of their stone homes. And so Hunter Boy says, Pet Crow, can you do me a favor and go and get one of those bows and arrow for me? And Pet Crow says, yes. And so Pet Crow, who again had been totally made black from the corn smut for trying to steal, the seeds of the Pueblo people, flew off, and he took from one of the porches of the Pueblo people a quiver with 4 arrows in it and a bow, and he brought them back to Hunter Boy. This is the quiver he found, with the 4 arrows in the quiver with feathers on them, and they had stone points, and they would shoot these from the bow, and they would hit the animal that they were hunting. No one did any wanton killing of animals. It was only as necessary for food and clothing. This was a bow and arrow from the set that Pack Rat found and brought to Hunter Boy. And so Hunter Boy went out into the countryside to practice using this bow and arrow because, he really had never used one and didn't know. And at first it was difficult. He had trouble hitting a target. But he kept practicing and practicing, and he improved. And then one day he was out hunting, with his bow and arrow, and he especially had one arrow that he was very proud of. And this arrow was made of red mahogany wood, and it had 4 feathers on it, and it also had an obsidian point. And this was an especially important arrow to Hunter Boy. And so he used it when he shot at something he saw moving in the brush. It turned out it was a small rabbit. He grazed the skin of the small rabbit, but didn't kill him, and the rabbit took off for its home. It lived underneath the earth in an earthen cave. And he ran into his home, and he closed the braided yucca gate. You saw earlier in the picture the whole home of a rabbit family. The living room, the kitchen, the children's room, the restroom, all of that where the rabbit family lived. And it wasn't just the nuclear family, it was grandmother rabbit and grandfather rabbit and cousins and uncles and a whole extended family living underneath the earth together. The rabbits would grind seeds inside a bowl, and they would use them. The little rabbits would gather the seeds and they would bring them home and they would mush them up, and so they could use them in their cooking. And in addition, grandmother would make a wonderful stew and would serve it to everyone. And the bowls she had were magic bowls because they never emptied until the person eating from them was filled. And so the rabbit people knew that they would always have enough food to eat. And when they cooked the rabbit, the Navajos had no knowledge of how you would even cook a rabbit to eat. They had a special method of doing it. They would use saltbush, and they would wrap the rabbit in mustard leaves and prairie grass, and they would cover it with watercress, and they would put sage in, and in this way they would season the rabbit as it was cooking. And they would cook it underground because the rabbit lived underground. They believed it should be cooked underground. So they would make a fire underground, and then with the coals there, they would place a pot with the rabbit in it to cook, and they would cover it up, and they would keep a fire going on the surface. And I remember in Girl Scouts when I was in junior high, we would cook in the same manner when we wanted to cook roast beef or spaghetti or something underground, and I thought that was a lot of fun. And so Hunter Boy is out practicing shooting. He's grazed this rabbit who has run home. Now that Hunter Boy is trying to go after his arrow that he loves so much, his red mahogany wood arrow with the obsidian tip and the 4 feathers, and so he's digging underground trying to track down the baby rabbit that he had grazed. And all of a sudden the earth begins to close in upon him, and he's actually buried under the earth. And he hears a voice said, come to our home. And it's Grandfather Rabbit. And so Hunter Boy follows the sound of this voice, and there's a braided yucca door, but it's much too small for him to enter into this little rabbit home. And so Grandfather Rabbit says, blow, 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 blow upon it, and it will enlarge, and you will be able to enter. And so that's exactly what happens. And he comes into the home of the rabbit family. There are baby rabbits in the crib and in the playpen and in the high chair. Other rabbits are sitting on the couch. Other rabbits are playing games. Everyone is busy inside this home doing something. And so Grandfather Rabbit asks him, "Are you the one that shot my grandson?" And Hunter Boy says, "It was a movement in the bush. I didn't know it was a rabbit that I was shooting." And so anyway, the grandson was wrapped in a warm blanket and was sitting in front of a fire as he was being tended to by Grandmother Rabbit for his injury. And Hunter Boy explains that the Dene have no meat to eat. They eat vegetables and nuts and berries and fruit, but they have no meat. And that Pack Rat had seen the Pueblo people eating meat. They were eating rabbit and deer and knew how to cook them. The Dene had no traditions, no ceremonial rites, no weapons, no idea about having meat with protein as a source in their diet. And so Grandfather Rabbit says, well, let me think about it. And so he does. And he decides that he will help Hunter Boy and the Dene. He doesn't want them killing wantonly, but he does create a source of food for them. He takes the cattails that I had told you about, and he goes up to the surface of the earth, and he throws cattails to the east, he throws cattails to the south, he throws cattails to the west, and he throws cattails to the north. He sings and chants, and the cattails turn into rabbits. And these rabbits will be the source of food for the Navajos. And they will learn that they are to cook them underground, and they are to cook them well, stuffed with sage and saltbush, wrapped in mustard leaves, and lining the underground oven with watercress. They are also told not to eat the heart or liver, because this will make them ill. And so Hunter Boy goes back to First Woman, and he tells her everything he has learned from Grandfather Rabbit, and that the rabbits that are on the surface of the earth were created specially through Grandfather Rabbit's medicine so that the Navajos might have a protein meat source to eat from. And so First Woman thanks Hunter Boy. She appoints him the hunt chief for the Dene. And from then on, the Dene are able to hunt rabbit for food. But they remember this story of the grandson rabbit who was grazed, and they are appreciative to him for his injury, for that injury led them to Grandfather Rabbit and to the creation of the rabbit as a source of food for the Navajo.